Warning: the following program contains subject matter that may be disturbing to some audiences. Viewer discretion advised. You're listening to Descent to Depravity, where we investigate the darkest corners of the human psyche, one chilling story at a time.
This is one of the most disturbing cases I've ever seen in my life. It's a good reason to retire at some point.
Deasia Watkins is now held on a $5 million bond.
Shocking, unthinkable.
You have to be sick. And no other reason for it. You just got to be sick to do something like that.
Cincinnati, where's the address of your emergency?
Somebody please send the police. My niece,
Okay,
my
ma'am.
baby, please.
Is the baby breathing?
Listen, lady, the baby is deceased.
What do you see when you look at the child?
My children, look, lady, I don't want to describe the scene. The screen is very, very bad, all right?
I need all units to respond. 311, I need units.
They say a mother's love knows no bounds, a force so powerful it can overcome even the darkest storms. But what happens when that storm consumes her entirely? When the very hands meant to cradle and protect become instruments of unimaginable horror? On a quiet morning in March 2015, in a modest Cincinnati home, first responders arrived to a scene that would haunt them forever. On a blood-soaked kitchen counter, they discovered the lifeless body of 3-month-old Janiyah Watkins, stabbed multiple times and decapitated. Just down the hallway, her mother, Deasia, lay in her bed, calm, detached, emotionless, and without a care in the world. 20-year-old Deasia Watkins had committed a crime so horrific, so incomprehensible, it shattered the lives of those who knew her. Her 3-month-old daughter, Janiyah, had been brutally murdered. And the question that lingers to this day is why. This wasn't an impetuous decision, nor was it a cry for help. It was a cold, calculated, and sinister act by a so-called mother who descended into depravity. After she was caught, arrested, and interrogated, she showed no remorse, stating she had none when asked. The signs were there, the danger was obvious, and yet no one stopped her. However, this tragedy is more than just a failure of systems. It is the consequence of untreated mental health, naive relatives, and a woman whose actions were nothing short of monstrous. And if we're honest, she had no business being near a child, let alone having one. Before we speak of what Deasia Watkins did, before the unspeakable act that would carve itself into public consciousness, we have to go back. Not to the crime scene, not to the moment of violence, but to the days and weeks before, where something sinister was already unraveling. Hamilton County Job and Family Services wasn't a bystander in this story. They were present and engaged, moving through the shadows of a case that was anything but ordinary. They followed protocol, they made contact, they did what they were supposed to do. And yet what lay beneath the surface was something no form or training could fully prepare them for. It was the early hours of January 25, 2015. While most of Cincinnati was deep in slumber, the uneasy stillness of a crime-ridden neighborhood in Cheviot was broken by the sound of desperate cries. A woman's voice echoed through the night, followed by the piercing wails of a baby. It was a disturbance that would prompt a call to local authorities, a call that would begin a chain of events leading to a tragic and unforgettable outcome. At approximately 3:03 a.m., the Hamilton County Department of Job and Family Services received a report from Sergeant Fenster of the Cheviot Police Department. The allegation was serious: physical abuse. The names given were 20-year-old Deasia Watkins, the alleged perpetrator, and her newborn daughter, Janiyah Watkins, the alleged child victim. Police had been dispatched to 3317 Kamek Terrace, Apartment 8, Cheviot, Ohio. Neighbors reported the alarming sounds, and upon arrival, officers confirmed what they had heard. Behind the closed door, a baby's cries mixed with the incoherent shouting of Deasia Watkins. Despite repeated attempts, no one answered. The officers announced their intent to forcibly enter, only to be met by a man who opened the door, a relative later identified as Chris Gully. Sergeant Fenster described the scene. The air inside the apartment was thick with the pungent smell of marijuana. Furniture was sparse, but the home was warm with no visible hazards. Still, what concerned officers most was Deasia. Under the influence of marijuana, she appeared disoriented, emotionally unstable, and, in Sergeant Fenster's observation, pretty out of it. At one point, she even passed out with her eyes open. Cradled tightly in Deasia's arms was baby Janiyah. The tension escalated as paramedics arrived. Deasia refused to release her daughter, clutching the infant with unsettling force. Police and medical personnel intervened, prying the baby out of her arms. A thorough examination showed no signs of injury. Janiyah, just 2 months old, was found physically unharmed, but the emotional distress was evident. As the situation unfolded, the family dynamic came into focus. The infant's father, James Brown, had been at work during the incident. Without a cell phone, he had no way of knowing the chaos that had erupted at home. It was Gully who called McDonald's to notify Brown, who quickly returned. Deasia's behavior had taken a troubling turn in recent days. She spoke erratically, professing newfound religious beliefs, claiming to communicate with demons, and exhibiting behavior far removed from her usual self. The concern was clear. Deasia's deteriorating mental state was impossible to ignore. She appeared to be in a state of acute mental disturbance. Her eyes were dark wells, bottomless and still, as if something inside had long since slipped away. This compelled officers to transport her to UC Hospital for a psychological evaluation. Sergeant Fenster indicated that pending the results, Deasia would face charges of child endangerment. Yet as the apartment returned to a quiet stillness, the echoes of that night lingered. This was the first time law enforcement had responded to the residents. No previous arrests, no documented incidents of domestic violence, just a mother gradually losing her grip on reality. Her psychological decline progressed unchecked until it escalated beyond control, presenting a pattern too severe to dismiss. No one knew it then, but what had begun as quiet concern was inching toward something unfathomable, a turning point that reframed every prior detail as part of a much darker trajectory. By 10:13 a.m., allegations of physical abuse involving Deasia Watkins and her daughter, Janiyah, had been formally screened in and accepted for investigation by Hamilton County's Department of Job and Family Services. The initial response fell to Jessica Bird, a seasoned caseworker in the screening department. Her task was urgent: complete the safety assessment before the case moved to intake. It was a brief, critical window where a single misstep could alter the course of a life. It was a standard response, routine even. However, a safety assessment is more than a list of questions to ask when meeting with the alleged perpetrator. It is a structured, high-stakes tool used to evaluate risk and the overall family dynamic, designed to guide child welfare caseworkers through moments where the consequences of a decision can echo for a lifetime. As Bird prepared to begin her investigation, the weight of responsibility was evident. The safety of an infant lay at the center of her work. In the early hours of January 25, 2015, Jessica Bird, caseworker in the screening department of Hamilton County Department of Job and Family Services, began her assessment of the allegations involving Deasia Watkins and her infant daughter, Janiyah. Later that morning at 11:15 a.m., Bird proceeded with a home visit to Mr. Brown's residence. Upon arrival, she was greeted by Chris Gully, the cousin of James Brown, Janiyah's father. Chris welcomed Bird inside, where she found James lying on the couch, holding a sleeping Janiyah on his chest. As James woke to engage with Bird, she observed his gentle, attentive care toward his daughter when she stirred, whispering reassurances and affectionately kissing her cheek. Bird noted that Janiyah appeared well-groomed and without any visible injuries. The apartment, while somewhat cluttered, was not hazardous. Bird observed essential supplies for Janiyah. Gully recounted the events of the previous night. He explained that Deasia had initially seemed fine, and they had been watching an episode of Law and Order together. However, without warning, Deasia became visibly distressed, crying and screaming uncontrollably. Gully confirmed that she neither harmed nor threatened Janiyah, nor expressed any intent to do so. He was unable to identify what triggered her emotional outburst. James provided additional context, stating that his relationship with Deasia had been stable and positive throughout their 2 years together. However, about a month after Janiyah's birth in early January, Deasia's behavior began to change. She became increasingly preoccupied with religious thoughts, often referencing the presence of demons. James recalled that her emotional state would shift rapidly, transitioning from calm to hysterical in moments. To illustrate her distress, James played a recording for Bird, capturing Deasia's wailing and anguished pleas. Her voice echoed through the recording, crying out phrases like, "Why God? What did I do wrong? And who are these demons?" James explained that he had felt helpless, holding Janiyah as he watched Deasia in emotional turmoil. When asked, James denied any knowledge of a formal mental health diagnosis for Deasia. He admitted that she occasionally used marijuana, but was unsure if she had done so in Janiyah's presence. James confirmed that he did not use any substances himself and had no mental health concerns. Furthermore, he stated that there was no history of domestic violence within their relationship and expressed concern for Janiyah's safety. James agreed to implement a safety plan. Under the terms of this plan, Janiyah would remain in his care at the apartment, while Deasia would remain elsewhere until further notice. James committed to supervising any contact between Deasia and Janiyah, and acknowledged his responsibility to ensure his daughter's safety. He understood that Deasia's participation in the safety plan would also be required for it to be effective. Brown had been working the third shift at a local McDonald's for nearly a year, walking 35 minutes through the dark streets each night, clinging to the promise of a promotion. But when things at home spiraled, he made the rare call to miss work, choosing instead to stay home with Janiyah. With his schedule set to resume Tuesday, he turned to the only person he trusted, his aunt, Janiyah White. On a caseworker-monitored call, Janiyah quickly agreed to watch the baby. She admitted she had heard James's concerns about Deasia's volatile behavior and suspected postpartum depression. She swore to uphold strict supervision guidelines, but her past cast a long shadow. Janiyah's CPS file was littered with red flags, substantiated neglect, indicated physical abuse, and a history of domestic violence. Her record also included a dismissed theft charge and a conviction for beating the father of her child. Still, she was open about her record, hoping it wouldn't cost her this chance. The caseworker, cautious but listening, promised a full review. As a backup, James offered his 21-year-old sister, but the clock was ticking and the choices were few. To fast-track the safety plan, the caseworker took James to get fingerprinted. At the Justice Center, James was processed and officially named the only approved caregiver. He voiced worries about switching Janiyah from breast milk to formula, and admitted he lacked a phone or pediatrician contact for now. It was just James, doing his best to protect his daughter from the storm closing in. It was late afternoon on January 25, 2015. Around 4:15 p.m., a call came into the University of Cincinnati Hospital. On the line was Jessica Bird, concerned, persistent, and looking for answers. She wasn't calling for just anyone. She needed to reach a social worker in the psychiatry department. Her concern, a woman named Deasia Watkins. After several frustrating transfers, the call finally landed at 5 West, the psychiatric unit at Deaconess Hospital, where Deasia was being held. The caseworker was connected to Lily Quarles, the nurse responsible for Deasia's care that day. But the news wasn't comforting. There were no social workers available, not that day. Still, Bird pressed on. She needed to know, was Deasia mentally fit to make decisions about her child? It was a simple question with devastating weight. Nurse Quarles didn't hesitate. Her voice was calm, clinical, but clear. No. In her professional opinion, Deasia was not in a stable state of mind. Not now, not that day. The nurse explained that the medication was still working its way through Deasia's system. She was hopeful that by tomorrow things might look different, that maybe the fog would lift. And so, with no immediate answers and a mother still unraveling behind hospital walls, Bird hung up. Bird saw enough to know this case couldn't be ignored. It was pushed up the chain, fast-tracked to the Intake Investigations Unit. On the morning of January 26, 2015, just one day after the unsettling phone call with Nurse Quarles, Johnson's phone rang. On the other end was Michael Madigan, a social worker from Deaconess Hospital. His voice carried weight, an urgency that couldn't be ignored. He was calling with an update on Deasia Watkins. Deasia was still under psychiatric hold, 72 hours of forced evaluation locked behind the clinical walls of Deaconess. But now she was lucid enough to talk. According to Madigan, doctors had confirmed what many feared. Deasia was suffering from postpartum psychosis, one of the most extreme and dangerous mental breaks that can follow childbirth. And that wasn't all. She had also tested positive for marijuana. At first, she denied it, but once faced with lab results, she admitted the truth. Johnson listened carefully as Madigan explained Deasia's current condition. She would remain at the hospital until at least Wednesday. After that, it was up to the psychiatrist to decide whether to discharge her. But it was what Deasia said that chilled the conversation. She had become fixated on her child, desperately worried about what the baby would eat now that she was no longer breastfeeding. But that option was off the table. Deasia had been prescribed Risperdal, a powerful antipsychotic that made breastfeeding impossible. Still, her obsession with the baby's feeding wasn't what struck the hardest. Madigan shared something that made the hair on the back of Johnson's neck rise. Despite being in the grips of a serious psychiatric crisis, she seemed eerily detached. She minimized everything, brushing off the concerns, the psychiatric hold, the diagnosis, as if it were nothing. "No big deal," she had said. Those 3 words rang in Johnson's ears, because now the question wasn't just about Deasia's diagnosis. It was about her insight. Did she truly understand the danger she posed and the consequences of her unraveling mind? Or was reality slipping through her fingers just like everything else? On January 26, 2015, at approximately 2:45 p.m., Johnson knocked quietly on the door of apartment 8, tucked inside the worn-down housing complex on Kamek Terrace in Cincinnati. No warning, no heads up. This was an unannounced visit by design, the kind made when something doesn't feel right. Inside, only one person answered, James Brown. He looked tired, overwhelmed, and alone. Deasia Watkins, the mother of his child, was unraveling. He told Johnson she had been talking about demons, preaching in the dead of night, waking him from sleep to deliver long, rambling sermons about who knows what. She wasn't like this before, he said. Not before Janiyah was born. Now she was different. James looked torn and conflicted. He admitted he didn't feel comfortable letting Deasia move back in. Not like this. Her mind didn't seem right, and he wasn't willing to risk his daughter's safety. He made it clear. His name was the only one on the lease, and if it came down to it, if things got worse, he would tell her to leave. Later that afternoon at 3:50 p.m., Johnson arrived at 4716 Hamilton Avenue. Janiyah Brown, young, pregnant, and wide-eyed, answered the door. She explained that she didn't live there. It was her aunt's home. She was just staying for the day, watching her little cousin. Janiyah was there too. Johnson examined the baby. No visible injuries, no torn clothes, nothing stained. But wounds don't have to bleed to hurt. Every child services worker knows that some pain hides deeper. At first, Janiyah chose her words carefully, but the truth doesn't stay quiet forever. She admitted she hadn't known Deasia had mental problems, but she had noticed something was off. Deasia talked too fast, smiled at nothing. Janiyah didn't know the diagnosis, but she had seen the signs, even if she didn't recognize them. Now she was in the middle of it. 11 weeks pregnant, no job, no medication, no criminal record, just trying to survive. Johnson helped her with the lead's paperwork, went over the safety plan, and spent time explaining infant sleep safety. Another visit, another file, another name added to a long and growing list. Outside, the wind had picked up. Inside, the silence remained. But something was coming, and whether they admitted it or not, everyone could feel it. January 27, 2015. A bitter winter morning outside Deaconess Hospital in Cincinnati. Inside, behind the cold walls of the psychiatric unit, sat a 20-year-old mother under a 72-hour investigative hold. Her name was Deasia Watkins. Intake investigations caseworker Kristen Johnson stepped into the psych unit, her heels slicing through the silence like a warning. The corridor was cold, clinical, dead air wrapped in fluorescent light. She She was there to interview Deasia Watkins and complete a safety assessment. Deasia sat still, eyes unreadable, face composed like a mask. Her voice, flat and defiant, cut through the stillness. She denied everything. According to her, it had all been a misunderstanding. She told Kristen the police had shown up at her home over a noise complaint. Just loud music, nothing more. But things escalated. She claimed the officers were aggressive, accusing her of using drugs. "I don't smoke," she insisted. "I didn't smoke anything for them to think that." What happened next, in her words, was a blur. Deasia said one of the officers tried to take her daughter Janiyah right out of her arms. She denied laying a hand on her baby. She denied the choking the officers had reported. She said she didn't understand how things had spiraled to the point of being hospitalized. But Kristen Johnson had more information than Deasia realized. The hospital had already diagnosed her with postpartum psychosis, an acute mental condition that can strike new mothers with terrifying force. She had also tested positive for marijuana, but Deasia refused to accept it. She said the test was wrong and she never touched drugs. "I'm not crazy," she said, her voice distant. Johnson gently pushed forward. She explained that Deasia had been prescribed an antipsychotic medication with strict warnings, including a ban on breastfeeding. But Deasia claimed no one ever told her, that no social worker had explained anything, that she wasn't taking any meds at all. Eventually, she nodded. She understood now. No breastfeeding, formula only. They talked more about her life, her past, and her baby. Deasia was unemployed. She had graduated from Western Hills High School just the year before. No history of cognitive delays, no medications until now. She had been arrested once as a juvenile for fighting, and she'd grown up in foster care, though she admitted she didn't know why. But in the middle of all of it, her voice softened when she spoke of Janiyah. "She's the best thing in my life right now," she said. She leaned on James, the baby's father, and her own mother, Tina, for support. On paper, it looked like a young mother trying to find her footing. But behind the smiles, behind the reassurances, there was something fractured. Johnson reviewed the safety plan. Doctor's orders had to be followed. Formula needed to be added to her WIC application. Weekly check-ins would monitor her mental health and ensure Janiyah's safety. Deasia nodded and signed the papers. Besides Deasia's mental health, there was nothing that screamed danger. On paper, everything seemed routine. The forms were filled, the warnings logged, a plan drafted and filed away. But behind those hospital walls, something far more sinister was brewing, something no one saw coming. Because from that moment forward, Janiyah Watkins was never truly safe again. The sun was starting to sink over Hamilton County as Kristen Johnson, caseworker for Child Protective Services, stepped out of her car and into the shadows of the Brown Watkins residence. This wasn't a surprise visit. It was scheduled, routine on paper, but there was nothing routine about what waited inside. She brought with her vouchers for formula and diapers. What she walked into was far heavier. Present in the home at the time of the visit was James, Deasia, their daughter Janiyah, and James's paternal cousin, Chris Gully, the same cousin who had stood by when the storm first cracked open Deasia's world. Chris drifted in from the back room, headphones slung around his neck, the bass of his music still humming in the air. Johnson handed James the vouchers, a simple exchange cloaked in tension. Deasia watched, arms cradling her daughter like armor, her expression drawn, but defiant. "There's nothing wrong with me," she said flatly. "That's why they let me go." Johnson didn't flinch. She had heard that before. She explained again, postpartum psychosis, Risperdal, no breastfeeding, no exceptions. The words were clinical but heavy, like bricks being stacked. Both James and Deasia nodded, but only one of them meant it. Janiyah lay quiet in her mother's arms, sleeping, perfect, untouched by the weight pressing into that room. But Deasia wasn't listening, not really. "I refuse to believe that there's something wrong with me," she repeated, more like a curse than a confession. "I didn't do anything wrong. I would never hurt my child." Kristen pressed again. "The medication, the treatment, the stakes." That's when James snapped. "You need to comply," he barked, "or you need to leave my house. My daughter is not leaving this house because you don't want to get help. It's serious. You need help, or you need to go. Deasia broke. She began kicking, screaming, words lost in a rising panic. James stepped forward, arms out, trying to take Janiyah. Deasia clung to her like the only thing left in the world. Her grip was iron, her face desperate. James pried Janiyah away. You need help, he growled, and you're either going to work with them or you have to go. It's simple. Chris Gully, who had stayed in the shadows, finally spoke up. You've been talking weird lately, he said quietly. It wouldn't hurt you to talk to someone. Deasia's eyes were wide, glassy. I don't think I need help, she whispered. But then came the quiet surrender. I'll do it. I don't have anywhere else to go. Johnson reminded them both. The safety plan stood. No alone time with Janiyah, supervision only. Either James or Jalecia, the child's aunt, had to be present at all times. Deasia said she understood. She admitted she hadn't filled her Risperdal prescription yet, but promised she'd do it today. Whether it was truth or survival, Kristen couldn't tell. Johnson pressed the urgency once more. If Deasia failed to follow through, the agency would file for custody of Janiyah. The surface looked stable, words spoken, papers signed, steps promised. But something darker stirred underneath. Deasia's refusal to face her unraveling mind, her grip on Janiyah, the raw fear behind her eyes. It all lingered long after Johnson walked away. On February 6, 2015, the afternoon light filtered through the windows of 3317 Camvic Drive, Apartment 8, as Kristen Johnson pulled up for an unannounced home visit. At 1:30 p.m., she knocked on the door, hoping to get a closer look at the state of the household and the safety of Janiyah. As Johnson entered the home, she observed Janiyah seemed healthy and unharmed, free from any visible injuries or deformities. She was nestled in her mother's arms, and her calm demeanor spoke volumes. For now, Janiyah appeared safe. James reported that the safety plan, the one put in place to ensure Janiyah's protection, was progressing well. His words seemed reassuring, but Johnson knew this was only part of the picture. The real test was what was happening beneath the surface, in the details of daily life, and it didn't take long for the visit to take a turn. Johnson turned her attention to Deasia. Johnson had some concerns about whether she was taking her medication, a critical piece of the safety plan. The doctors had explicitly warned her not to breastfeed Janiyah while taking the meds. Deasia confirmed that she had picked up her prescription, but when asked to show it, she refused. I don't feel good and don't feel like getting up, she said, her tone defensive. The refusal wasn't just about her discomfort. It raised a red flag for Johnson. Johnson suggested Deasia tell her where it was in the house so she could check it. Again, Deasia refused. James was there watching the exchange, but he remained silent. His gaze was fixed on Deasia, but he did nothing to intervene. The tension was palpable, and Johnson couldn't ignore it. The refusal to show the medication suggested something was off, and she even filled the prescription. Despite this, Deasia continued to insist she was taking her medication as prescribed and claimed she had stopped breastfeeding Janiyah in line with medical advice. Her words seemed to contradict her actions, or at least her unwillingness to fully comply with the safety plan. Johnson pushed forward, suggesting that the family attend a conference at the agency to discuss the case and plan for the future. James, who said his days off changed weekly, promised to call Kristen on Wednesday to finalize his availability. Deasia, who seemed to resist any further discussion, briefly mentioned that Janiyah had been added to WIC and showed Kristen a few cans of formula on the counter. It was a small victory. At least Janiyah was getting formula, as recommended. James also offered an update on their daughter's recent doctor's visit, and there was some positive news. Janiyah was meeting her developmental milestones. She was healthy, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and drinking about 5 ounces per feeding, a reassuring sign that she was thriving. But the visit didn't end with just good news. Johnson reminded them that the safety plan was still in effect, and it had to be followed carefully. There were too many unanswered questions, particularly when it came to Deasia's adherence to her treatment plan. On February 12, 2015 at 1:30 p.m., caseworker Kristen Johnson attempted to reach James Brown, hoping to finalize the plans for a much-needed family conference. She called, but no one picked up. After leaving a detailed message with her contact information, She waited for a response. Just 10 minutes later, Kristen dialed another number, this time James's sister, Jalecia Brown. She had more direct information about what was going on behind closed doors. Jalecia shared that James had called her a few days earlier, asking for her availability, saying he would call Kristen to set up the family conference. Jalecia confirmed she was free next week and ready to meet, but there was more she needed to share. She went on to explain her growing concerns about her niece, Janiyah. Jalecia hadn't seen the baby in almost 2 weeks, and now she feared that James was no longer following the safety plan in place. Apparently, while James worked, Deasia, Janiyah's mother, was left in charge of the baby along with James's cousin Chris, who was not on the safety plan. This put Janiyah at risk. But what concerned Jalecia even more was the fact that James had not been returning her calls or messages. When she finally managed to get a hold of him on Saturday, he told her something troubling. According to James, Deasia was controlling the phone, deleting any calls or messages that came through. Then, Jalecia learned from their Aunt Caretha that Deasia had been breastfeeding Janiyah, despite clear advice from Deaconess Hospital to the contrary. When confronted about this, James reportedly shrugged it off, saying, "She's been doing it anyway, so I figure she's just going to keep doing it." Delicia's worries only grew. She didn't just want answers, she wanted action. She told Johnson she was ready to step in if needed. If Janiyah had to be removed from the home, Jalecia wanted to be considered as a placement option. But first, she needed to speak with her brother and get some clarity about the family conference. The next day, February 13th, 2015, at 2:15 p.m., Johnson arrived unannounced at James's home on Camvic Terrace, hoping to get a better understanding of what was happening in the household. When she stepped inside, there was James, Deasia, and little Janiyah. The baby looked fine, no visible injuries, no signs of neglect, but Deasia's appearance was concerning. Her clothing was ragged, her hair messy, and she didn't appear to be taking care of herself. Kristen was immediately concerned. As she began speaking with Deasia, she asked her how she was feeling and whether she was still taking her prescribed medication. Deasia's response was dismissive. "I feel fine," she said. "Yes, I'm still on my meds. Gosh." James nodded along, seeming to support the claim. He told Johnson that the safety plan was going well, and that Janiyah was going to be staying with her aunt for the weekend. But then things took a turn. Deasia insisted that she would arrange for Janiyah to stay home with her, despite the fact that James had clearly stated Janiyah needed to go with her aunt. "No, she won't," James interjected firmly. "She wants Janiyah to stay here with her, and I keep telling her that the baby can't stay here while I go to work." Deasia didn't understand why she couldn't stay with Janiyah, and Kristen took the opportunity to explain her diagnosis again. She reminded Deasia that the safety plan was there to help monitor her interactions with Janiyah, but Deasia seemed to brush it off. She said she understood, but it was clear she was growing frustrated with the constant reminders of her condition and what she needed to do to comply. Johnson took a deep breath and brought up the upcoming family conference. The meeting was set for Tuesday at 10 a.m. at the agency, and both James and Jalecia were confirmed to attend. Deasia, however, was not on board. "I ain't coming," she snapped. "There ain't nothing wrong with me, or I would still be in that hospital. They let me go because they know ain't nothing wrong with me." Johnson calmly explained what a family conference was, and how crucial it was for Deasia to attend since she was Janiyah's primary guardian. Deasia remained resistant, but finally she agreed to attend, if only reluctantly. The ball was now in their court. As the weeks unfolded following Deasia Watkins' psychiatric evaluation, her partner James Brown began expressing growing concern, not just for the well-being of their daughter, but for the safety of their entire home environment. James began texting the caseworker directly. He admitted that he didn't believe Deasia had been taking her prescribed medications. In fact, he claimed he'd never seen her take a single dose. He feared she was abandoning the plan, and with that, any chance of maintaining custody of their child. James wanted her out of the home, but there was a problem. Deasia was a legal tenant. She had signed the lease when they moved in. Not long after, James sent another troubling message. He explained that he didn't have a ride to the scheduled family conference that day. He hadn't been paid yet and couldn't afford transportation. More importantly, he revealed that Deasia had left their home the previous Saturday night and hadn't come back. He had no idea where she was and no way to contact her. Johnson informed him that due to their absence at the conference, the agency will likely file for custody of their daughter. The caseworker contacted the duty officer and began filing for custody, submitting a formal complaint as required. Soon after, Johnson made an announced visit to the home. James Brown was present with Janiyah and Deasia Watkins. Janiyah appeared active and showed no signs of visible injury. Deasia, however, refused to come out and speak. James described her as increasingly withdrawn and standoffish, noting that she'd barely spoken since returning home days earlier. Once again, he expressed a desire to file for custody, but still hadn't managed to find a ride downtown. The caseworker informed him that a complaint had already been filed for custody. On February 27, 2015, Johnson arrived unannounced at 3317 Camvic Terrace. James Brown, alone with baby Janiyah, said the child's mother had vanished days ago. With no WIC, no formula, and no custody filed, James was left scrambling. He admitted he was anxious, that without legal custody he might lose Janiyah for good. The child appeared unharmed, but the silence told another story. A court date was set for March 6, but unfolded at court would change everything. On February 27, 2015 at 1:30 p.m., Johnson called Deasia Watkins. The line crackled with silence between questions. Deasia sounded distracted, distant. Kristen told her, 3 times, about the March 6 court date and the fair assessment, but Deasia kept repeating, "I don't understand." Her voice was hollow, unfocused. No one knew it then, but that call was the first crack in something about to break wide open. March 6, 2015. Court date. Hamilton County Child Protective Services presented the evidence. Magistrate Murphy didn't hesitate. Temporary custody of Janiyah Watkins was granted to the county. Deasia Watkins was ordered to complete a mental and substance abuse assessment. Both parents were ordered to have no contact with Janiyah, unless during visitation hours at the agency. After a background check and fingerprinting, Hamilton County cleared Deborah Stewart. She was approved, barely, and Janiyah was placed in her care. The system handed her over with warnings etched in stone. Caseworker Kristen Johnson made it clear. James Brown and Deasia Watkins were not to set foot in the home. No visits, no contact, no exceptions. If they wanted to see Janiyah, it would be under cold lights and watchful eyes at the agency. But not everyone was willing to follow the rules. On March 13, 2015, caseworker Kristen Johnson visited Deborah Stewart's home on Waldway Lane. It had only been a week. Deborah and the baby were both present. What she found didn't raise immediate red flags. Janiyah was clean, appropriately dressed for the weather in long sleeves and pants. There were no visible injuries, no concerning odors. Her hygiene was described as adequate. Deborah stated she had denied Deasia access to the child, as ordered by the court. She said she was looking into financial assistance through WIC and had scheduled a doctor's appointment for the following day, March 14th, to address a rash and scalp irritation. She even scheduled transportation for upcoming supervised visits. On paper, it looked like things were being handled. But during that visit, Deborah revealed a crack in her resolve. "I don't want to raise nobody else's child," she admitted. "I'm tired." A small sentence, a big warning. By then, the Intake Investigations Department had done its job. The physical abuse allegations were substantiated. Referrals were made. The case was being transferred to ongoing services. Kristen Johnson closed out her home visit that Friday, March 13th. Janiyah Watkins was alive. She was sleeping quietly. Everything seemed routine, but it would be the last time anyone from the agency saw her alive. March 16th, 2015. Just another Monday morning. Until it wasn't.
Cincinnati 911, where's the address of your emergency?
Somebody please send the police. My niece
Okay,
killed
ma'am.
her baby. Please.
What is the address?
5957 Wildway.
Okay, ma'am.
Lord, help me.
Ma'am, who were you just you were just talking to somebody. Who were you just talking to?
My son, he came over here, he found that I was asleep. And he let his kids in to go to school because they go from my house. And Daddy seen the baby on my children. Oh my God, help me.
Listen to me. Listen to me. I need you to stop crying, okay? Stop crying. I need you to take a deep breath and tell me what happened.
Ma'am, please send the police right away.
Ma'am, you weren't crying but I heard you talking to him. You were fine. And then when I picked up, you started crying. I need you to tell me what's going on.
Ma'am, I am crying. I was outside screaming.
What happened?
But he keeps telling me to calm down. I don't
What
know
happened?
All I know is my son came in here and woke me up and said, Mama, the baby's dead. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What I'm going to do because she killed this baby. Oh, God.
Okay, why are you saying she killed the baby?
Because the baby is in the room. Here, talk to my son, brother. Come talk to I can't talk to
How old is the baby?
The baby is 3 months. Oh, my God, I'm going to jail. Hello?
What happened?
Police. I don't know. This house is big. I don't know where my little cousin is. So can you please...
Where is the 3-month-old baby?
The baby is on my mama's kitchen counter with his head smashed. Now I need you to please send me.
Okay, is it a male or female?
Know where my little cousin is at. Now if a little girl pop up with a weapon, I'm not gonna have a little cousin no more. So can you please? I know it's hard to talk. Can you please just send the police?
Okay, I need to know what happened to the baby.
I don't know what happened to the baby. I came into the house. She told you. We came into the house. The baby was on the counter. My mom was in the bed asleep. I woke my mom up and we calling you. That's all I know. I don't know nothing else. I have a little cousin. She was here. I don't know.
Okay. Listen to me.
Look,
is the baby breathing?
listen, lady. The baby is deceased.
Okay. All right, we're sending the police and an ambulance, okay?
Mama.
What is your name, sir?
Mama, shush. Hello?
What is your name?
I'm Robert Stewart.
And who is the mother of the child?
Huh?
Who is the mother?
Deasia. What is Deasia's last name? Watkins.
Is she there right now?
No, I don't know where she's at. That's the problem. I don't know where this little girl is at. I don't even know if she's in this house. It's a big house, lady. Please. I don't want to look for her. So if you please send the police.
Listen to me, sir. We already have the run started, okay?
All right.
So no one has any idea what happened to the child.
Listen, lady, I cannot explain to you what happened because I do not know. Nobody knows. It happened sometime in the middle of the night.
Okay, what do you see when you look at the child?
Look, lady, I don't want to describe the scene. The screen is very, very bad. All right, the little baby head is open, open. I'm not going in there to touch nothing because I don't want to mess nothing up. I'm not going in there to look because I already seen it. But it's very violent. It's a very violent scene.
Dispatchers in Cincinnati received a call that would shake the very foundation of everyone who heard it. On the line, confusion, panic, then what no one ever expects to hear. The baby's dead. Inside a quiet home on Waldway Lane, first responders entered a scene that can only be described as hell made manifest. The victim, a newborn baby. Janiyah Watkins was found lifeless. Her tiny body lay on a kitchen countertop, surrounded by a landscape of blood. Her head separate from her body. A clean, deliberate one that made detectives question if this was the work of madness or evil, or both. Near her body was a large kitchen knife, the very weapon used to decapitate her. The right side of her face had multiple noticeable wounds appearing to be caused by officers and paramedics, seasoned professionals, were seen exiting the house in tears. Some vomited in the front yard. Others stood in stunned silence, unable to reconcile what they had just seen with anything remotely human. The woman found in the home was Deasia Watkins, the very mother Hamilton County had ordered to have no contact with Janiyah. But here she was, standing amid the wreckage of what she had done. She was covered in blood, her face vacant, her words incoherent. There was no scream, no panic, just a silence so loud it made the walls ache. Her death wasn't just violent. It was ritualistic, personal, deliberate. How Deasia ended up back in that home after being ordered to stay away would later become the center of public outrage and institutional shame. But at that moment, none of that mattered. A baby was dead. Her cries had gone unheard. her suffering drowned out by the one who was supposed to love her unconditionally. From that point on, Cincinnati Police's main priority was to get to the bottom of it and put the cold-blooded killer behind bars forever. Homicide detectives didn't waste any time. After Deasia was booked, they joined her in the interrogation room, ready to get down to business. She sat stoically in an interview room for several hours. Despite several attempts by detectives to initiate conversation, she would not speak. Detectives contacted the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office and were advised to proceed with aggravated murder charges. Deasia was not accepted at HCJC and was instead transported to the Deaconess Psychiatric Unit for treatment and observation. 3 days later, detectives interrogated her again. They began by a series of questions to measure her awareness of the situation and competency. Deasia claimed Janiyah was asleep in her crib the last time she saw her alive. She told detectives she believed Aunt Debbie had killed her daughter, insisting that her aunt sleepwalked during the night. When confronted with the evidence, Deasia could not explain why she was covered in blood. She told detectives her fingerprints would not be on the knife because she had never touched it. She acknowledged that she was aware she was not supposed to be around the baby, but she claimed this was only because of her marijuana use. Approximately 30 minutes into the interview, Deasia began changing her story. After another round of trying to explain the blood and claiming that nothing had upset her during the night, she finally confessed.
Once you got to the kitchen, what happened once you got there?
I took her in there.
Mm-hmm.
I took her in and I killed her.
Where did you get the knife from?
The kitchen.
Where at in the kitchen?
And the knife shot.
Was there a specific reason you grabbed that knife?
No, it's grabbed me on the close.
Do you remember what you did with that knife?
Yes.
What did you do?
I stabbed her over and over her head and then I cut her in the pocket.
What made you do that?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Do you remember if something started in the bedroom that upset you?
No. I don't know.
You don't know? After... What did you do with the knife after that?
Put it in her hand.
Was there a reason that you did that?
Yes.
Why did you put it in her hand?
So it looked like she did it.
So it would look like she did it?
Yes.
And when you went back to your room, how did that blood in there get all over your room? It was like on your walls, your door.
I started it off in there first.
You started in there first?
Yes.
Started stabbing in there first, or?
No. I threw her across the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I banged her head against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I picked something up and I just hit her.
You hit her with it?
It was a really long stick.
A long stick?
Yeah, a long stick.
Okay.
And then I banged her head. Put the stick up 3 times.
Okay.
Hit her.
3 times. You threw her or 3 times you hit her?
3 times with the stick, right?
Yeah, that's when I ran in the kitchen to kill her. Finish her off.
Once you started stabbing her, what made you think you needed to cut her head off after that?
She wanted that.
She wouldn't die? How do you know she wasn't dead?
Because she kept breathing and
She kept what?
breathing and moving around.
She kept breathing and moving around?
Yeah.
Even after you were stabbing her?
Yes.
Do you remember how many times you stabbed her?
3 times.
You stabbed her 3 times?
Yes.
Okay. When you went back into your bed and laid down, do you remember the police coming in? You heard the police come in?
Yes.
What were they saying to you?
Nothing.
Nothing? Then do you remember coming down here after that?
Yes.
And we were in a different room, but we sat in that other room in another office room. We talked to you for a while.
Yes.
Do you remember what we were saying to you?
Yes.
Okay. Was there a reason you wouldn't talk to us then?
No.
Do you remember when we took your clothes?
Yes.
What did we put you in after we took your clothes?
Some type of bodysuit.
Like a bodysuit?
Yeah.
Do you remember crying then?
Yes.
What made you cry then?
Good, for the jail.
So you were crying because you were in trouble?
Yes.
Okay. Do you regret what you did? Do you feel bad about what you did to Janiyah?
No.
Why don't you feel bad?
Just don't.
You just don't? Do you blame Janiyah for something?
No.
No?
No.
What made you want to kill her?
I don't know.
Do you think you could have just given her to James instead?
Yes. I get in contact with him.
Couldn't get in contact with him?
No.
Okay.
When you were changing her diaper, what happened next? Is that when you got mad at her, or that's when you threw her, or what happened then?
Yes, that's why. I threw it. So shoving her diaper, she kept crying. I took Janiyah. So they changed her diaper. He said, scream in the rain. And then I didn't get to change it. So I just threw her across the room. He didn't die, so I walked over there. I picked her up and banged her head and against the bookshelf 4 times. Then, after she was dying in, he clipped the big old stick and hit her in the head 4 times. She wasn't dying fast enough. So I took him around as fast as I could. Not as fast, but I did. And when I did, took the neck on out, stabbed her in her head, told her to die. Stabbed her in the eye. She was still touching. Just cut her neck.
How many times did you cut to get her neck severed?
Until it sliced off.
Was it 1 or 2 or 3?
I mean, I guess another.
March 21st, 2016. She stood in court, quiet, shackled, as the judge delivered her sentence. 15 years to life, a number, a countdown to nothing. Her eyes didn't scream for help. They didn't cry for forgiveness. They were empty. Like she had already buried herself in the same grave as her child. There is no system to blame, no scapegoat hiding in the corners. Deasia Watkins was not failed. She chose the knife. She chose the silence. And now, in a cold cell soaked in fluorescent light, she will rot alongside the memory of what she did. Her daughter's final lullaby replaced by the rattling of chains. Janiyah didn't cry that night. She didn't have time. 15 to life. For a woman who took 15 seconds to carve her name into hell.